Hello everybody, my name is Jennifer Jago DeVries. I'm the Executive Director here at the Crossing Arts, and we are so lucky and honored to have with us tonight Sam Zimmerman, and a Ojibwe artist from the Duluth area. His paintings are on the walls here, watercolors and acrylics, and we are going to invite Sam now to share more about those stories. If you have questions, we'll let Sam take it away.
All right, well, of course, Miigwech. So, bonjour, Sam Zimmerman Indisnikaj, Jawan Giziko Ojibwe Mung, Aji Jack and Dudam, Grand Portage direct descendant. And so this show, Walking the Shore, is a celebration of those relatives that I've experienced along the North Shore of Lake Superior. And so I'm honored to be here. I know it took us a couple of years to get this together. And so this collection is both of some older watercolors that I used in studies and that I was inspired by, into more recent pieces of different memories or learnings or experiences as recently as last month that I wanted to share with a bigger audience. Some of the pieces are part of my residency in Tennessee State Park because I am there painting and learning. And so Miigwech for inviting me into this space, and I'll get to sharing stories with you.
What if we start with the loon, since you're right here by this loon?
Okay. I spent time up in the Voyager National Park as a part of a residency. The park is celebrating its birthday, and I was asked if I would share my interpretation and my experience of the Voyager National Park, realizing that it's also ceded indigenous land. There are still family homesteads that are part of the park. It's 50 years old, and so I was asked to design a poster. But while I was working on that piece, I saw another painting at the same time, which is a twilight piece so it's Twilight Voyager loon, and you'll see that the loon, dominates the piece. But then there's also the Mainga and the wolf in the background, because there is a lot of conservation work around the wolf packs in the Voyager Park. They're doing a lot of conservation and monitoring, and so I wanted to celebrate these two particular relatives that reside there. And so one went to the park and then one came here. So, Miigwech.
Sam, I heard you mentioning when you were talking with other people that each of these paintings represent a spirit or an animal or an experience you had specifically. Can you talk a little bit about, when did you see a sturgeon?
Right.
Were you snorkeling?
No, well, I mean, so if we want, we'll walk up, we can move to the Name of the sturgeon. And some of it is also conversations that I've had. Fish Clan is one of those Ojibwe clans. I have a lot of Fish Clan friends. They actually serve as kind of like the peacekeepers between the Loon and the Crane clans. And so they bring really great spirits, a great spirit into the relationship. And so I was speaking with her, and there's a lot of sturgeon work being done by the Fond du Lac Band of Ojibwe in Carleton County in northern Minnesota. Sturgeons hold, they're the king of the fish. They are an incredibly old fish. I think the oldest one was 157 years old that was ever recorded in the Great Lakes. And so to honor that and just honor the teachings, I've actually seen sturgeon that have washed up on Gitchigami on Lake Superior, on the Superior side, because of boat traffic and just recreational, because they are quite large. And so in this particular case, I wanted to honor a fish that I had seen that had been struck, because you'll smell a sturgeon before you'll see a sturgeon. And so this is kind of captured the phases of moon, because think about how many phases of the moon a 157-year-old sturgeon has been under. And so it's captured in this piece.
Very cool.
Wow, Miigwech. Is there another piece that is audience favorite or would like to hear more about?
The watercolor sturgeon. The watercolor sturgeon.
The blue jay? Okay, so you might have to. People have strong feelings about blue jays. There's only one correct feeling, and that is that they're incredible. I was in a ceremony years ago where after ceremony, there were a number of blue jays that were with me while I was out in the woods. And typically you don't see more than a couple because they get really combative with each other, or bossy with each other. In this particular case, I had seen 3 or 4. I have a ribbon shirt that has a number of them on it because they're just a very important spirit to me. They're considered the tattler of the woods, Anishinaabe. This is superior blue jay to honor the colors of the lake, but also to honor the blues that are found in blue jay. Fun fact, their feathers aren't actually even blue. There's no blue in them, it's a sheen, which I still argue with people about because I still believe they're blue. But I've being up in the park at the Tetagooch working with naturalists, they've actually showed me the science, and I'm still defensive about it. But recently I didn't have any blue jays coming to visit with me, and had a conversation with my mom, and she reminded me of their preferred foods and things like that to bring them back. And sure enough, after I went and put all the foods out for them, the next day I had 3 out there, and this one was a little bit bolder than the other 2. And so he was just spending a lot of time with his flying back and forth, and I just really enjoyed it. This is probably one of my more recent pieces. I think I did it last month, like a month or so ago, like March or early April. It was one of the last pieces I did for this show because I wanted to honor that they're back. So, and it's probably one of my favorites.
When we spoke the other day, Sam, you were telling me how you get the tiny dots.
Yes.
Would you explain that a little
Sure.
bit?
One of my regrets is I didn't learn how to bead as a child when I had a chance to. And so I actually learned how to bead during the pandemic from Sarah Gee's house, who is with Heartberry. She taught a course, and it was one of my most incredible moments of my life was to learn how to bead again, to learn how to bead, having not learned. And so the way that I paint is a way to honor the practice of beading. And so I paint some with brushes, very small brushes, some with thumbtacks, some with toothpicks, safety pins, anything that can put a dot down. And then I'm really hard on brushes. I cut them up, I braid different hairs together. I just keep exploring how I can, I've glued safety pins at the end of chopsticks because the background would be the background or land in the pieces. I would paint typically on an easel, right? Because it's an angle surface. But when it comes to the dots, now I'm painting straight up and down. So, and sometimes I'll just paint like 10 or 15 skies over a couple months with no animals in them. It's just skies that I see over the lake. And then I'll have to have an experience with an animal relative or a fish or animal. And then I look at my studio wall and I'm like, that's the sky for that being. And then, so I might just paint skies nonstop for quite some time and then be inspired because I met a relative or had an experience or learning, and now I want to paint the piece. So, question?
I notice you have a moon in many of these pictures. Is there some significance to that?
Yeah, I met my grandmother once, my paternal grandmother, when I was very, very small. And the grandmother in Ojibwe is the moon. The grandfather is the sun. That's why when the eclipse happens and when they say don't look at the eclipse, it's because grandma and grandpa are talking or doing other things. But so the moon is my way to honor my grandmother. If I do pieces, like if I get commissioned to do a piece, it won't have a moon in it because it's not my story. It's not my piece. Very rarely will you see a sun, like the sturgeon. And the reason why there's a moon, a grandfather in this one is because it was summer when I met and it was bright. It was this brilliant, bright summer hot day. And the water was still, which if you ever see Lake Superior, when it's still, it's almost like glass versus, the typical like kind of rolling of the waves.
So I have a question about the watercolor.
Yeah, the watercolor sturgeon.
Yes.
When do you do the background?
So I don't paint like a traditional watercolorist just because I don't like watercolor. I don't think I give it the softness or patience that it requires because watercolor really has to, I think there's a certain personality and skill with brush strokes with watercolor. And so when I paint with watercolor, I'm working with not only different shades of the same blue, but I'm working with different brushes, and I'm working with one brush that's always wet with no paint on it to keep moving the paint around. And that's how I get some of these harder edges. Because watercolor has a spirit, and water itself has a spirit. It wants to flow and it wants to move and follow the contours of the paper. And here I am with a very wet brush, constantly moving it around to create some of these textures. And then so I build from the back, so you can see kind of this light layer. This is a very light blue cyan, like a very light cyan color. And as I'm moving forward and it's starting to dry, that's when I start dropping darker and darker colors onto it to push forward.
I like the vibrancy of it.
Say that again?
I like the vibrancy of it.
Yeah. And people that are working watercolors can recognize that I don't treat it like watercolor paint. I treat it like acrylic paint. So it's always staying wet. That's why I don't paint with oil, because I don't have the patience for oil. Same thing with watercolor. I don't have the patience for watercolor.
I hate cleaning it up.
Yeah. If I ever start painting with oil paint, please have an intervention. Something's been horribly wrong. So.
I'm interested in the story of the red.
Sure.
I don't know how you paint the body, all the different, what's all
Anyone that knows me, anyone that's related to me genetically, knows that I have a very strong feeling about rabbits, and the fact that I've only painted 2 ever. And in both times I painted a rabbit, I got a phone call from a parent or a relative like, "Are you okay?" Because I hate them. To a level like, if I see a rabbit in the woods, I will head the other way. That's all. You don't know me well enough to get that story. But there is a little spirit cedar tree in Grand Portage. It is one of our most important sites spiritually for Ojibwe people. You have to have permission to go to her. It's off limits. That's what I can share. But while I was up there, in this particular time I was up there, and I had received permission from the tribal council to take a non-indigenous person up there. And so we were walking along the path, and all of a sudden I saw this flash of white, and this waboose, this rabbit, had started, it was a snowshoe hare that was starting to change into its winter colors. And I made some comments about how delicious he looked, and how his fur would be really great in moccasins. But he didn't move. And you know, a lot of us have rabbits in our backyard. You can see the difference in a snowshoe hare. They're just so much bigger and wider in the back. But he had this beautiful whites that were starting to come up into his hip and his thigh, and he had a couple of splashes behind his neck. And I was so taken back because I had never seen one that wasn't full white, that was in that process. And I was like, all right, I will paint you. And this is the first rabbit I've ever painted, which led to an acrylic. But when I painted this one, everyone in my family had all kinds of words for me. Because they were like, oh, is the battle over? Have you forgiven them? Are you friends now? And I was like, absolutely not. But this one just had this great spirit that he was like, you know, he's in transition. And so I wanted to honor him for showing me him. Because he wasn't, they're very vulnerable. And there was no snow on the ground yet. So it just happened to be a very warm winter when he was starting to change. And I honored him with putting the snow in for him. Because there was one winter a couple years ago we had very light snow, and it was easy pickings for owls and raptors. Don't make that face, it's fine. Owls and raptors have to eat too. Because they were, you just look at all these, there was no way to hide. Sorry. You're welcome, language.
Do you know the story of the butterfly?
Yeah, my auntie up in Grand Portage, she plants these incredible flowers. And, if you drive along the North Shore in the early summer, you'll start to see the fireweed turn, and you'll start to see the lupins that, even though it's a weed, everyone loves lupins. Just these beautiful flowers. And I was talking to her about them, and all these painted lady butterflies, they're not very big. maybe, you know, a couple inches across, but they fly differently than some of the heavier like butterflies, like the monarchs or the swallowtails, and they're just very dainty. But if you look at them, because when they sit on flowers, they'll open and they'll open and they'll close, and then they'll stay closed for a count of like 10 seconds. And then when they open, you can actually see they have all these orange and brown speckles on them. And so when I saw them and I was talking to her, I asked her, I was like, can I paint your flowers and the butterfly? And she was like, yeah. And so that's one of my only butterflies I've ever done. I just thought it was, you know, especially with little beings, we don't give them the respect and the attention they deserve. We just assume they're always going to be there, especially when we talk about pollinators and other things like that. So if you would have told me 30 years ago I'd be painting butterflies, I would have been like, no, I'm not. But they're just a beautiful little, just the way they dance. So I wanted to honor it.
Do you paint completely from visual memory, or do you have to like make a sketch to remind
I sketch.
you? Okay.
Or more often I have like, you know, I'm a little bit of a hoarder when it comes to just like anything that I can write in. So I have like notes in my car, like if I see a fox run across the road, and I'll like, wherever I'm going, and I'm like, bonjour, and the person behind me is just like, what is he doing? Is all like, wherever I get to where I'm going, I'll just write like, saw a fox at J. Cook, and just throw it on my car seat just so I don't forget. Because I have paintings going on at home, and then I constantly will add Post-it notes to the wall of things that I've experienced or saw. Like, I wasn't expecting to do a blue jay because I'm working on something else. But then the blue jay, I was like, well, he showed up and he was here, and then I'm like, because I always have 3 or 4 paintings going on at the same time. So if I lose the spirit of a piece, then I can go to the other piece and keep working on it. And so I'm always rotating in my studio. So this particular piece was, how many of you have heard of the owl eruption that was going on in the North Shore, where they were all coming down, right? And so it doesn't happen very often. It happens like 10, I think when I asked my dad, he goes, it happens every like 15, 20 years. But because of it, what happens is it attracts all these birders. Like people from all over the country were starting to get to northern Minnesota because all these owls and different species of owls had come down. This was a piece that I wasn't planning on doing. I don't paint owls very often. And they're very spiritually important to me, and there's different views and opinions of owls in the Ojibwe culture. But in this particular piece, an owl had been killed. And I got a phone call about the owl being killed because one, it is a raptor, and so they're protected federally, but then they're also, there's a spirituality to them, and there's a power of medicine to them, where I got a call asking me like, what do we do? And how do we post about it, or how do we talk about it so that tourists to this area will understand how to engage with owls, how to keep distance and things like that. And I actually got a chance to have a conversation with the gentleman who had to get her off the road. And he sent me some pictures, and we had this talk, and just what they meant to me. I had no intention of painting a great gray because their feathers are so intense, and like getting all those dots. And I had to stop working on what I was doing because I actually went up and had a conversation in Tetagooch, and that's when we had the shield moon around, and I was leaving Tetagooch when the moon had the halo, it had doubled. And I had a conversation with a couple elders and my mom about it, and it's a healing moon, and so I stopped what I was doing and had to start that piece. And that piece took me a week because I just did not stop working on it for the entire week, because I needed to get that experience off my shoulders and out of my heart and honor her, and then I went back to what I was doing. But in that, because sometimes it's the experience that will dictate what I'm painting. Like today, a raven was at my studio because I can watch it, my studio, and this raven was having the best time ever. And I had no intention to paint a raven, but he was having the best time with all the peanut shells that were out there before I left. I was like, great, now I gotta paint a raven, because I watched the squirrel run to the studio back, and then I watched the raven throw, and so the raven was throwing the empty shells at the squirrel. I was like, great, now I gotta paint a raven. So, yeah.
Would you say that's how most paintings come to you, based on an experience? You know, it sounds like you've mentioned several times, I didn't intend to paint that,
Right.
It came to me.
Yeah, or a story, like some are based on dreams or teachings of stories that have been told. I'm always honored when I'm asked to paint a memory that or a story that someone shares. Like people will reach out to me and say, I had this dream, or I was speaking to an elder and shared, would you paint this for me? And I'm like, sure. And then we have a conversation about like appropriateness of like what, because those pieces don't go into galleries. They don't go into my books. These are just pieces that go to the person. So I would say probably like 75 to 80% of my pieces are direct experience. I saw a beaver a month ago eating an aspen tree. I had taken down an aspen tree, and I got to see where his teeth marks were in the wood. And so I actually had pieces of the wood that he chewed in my car as reference, so I can see how the teeth marks live in aspen. And I had no plan on painting a beaver because I just painted one for Grand Portage. And so I'm like, okay, well, I guess I went from, for years, never painting a beaver to now painting 2 in the same year. So it really depends on, I could drive home tomorrow to Duluth and see, I don't know, a crane. Or one thing that I saw on the way up here that I know I have to paint, a little sneak peek, is I have to paint a red-winged blackbird because they're everywhere on the way here.
They are.
And I saw them all sitting in the tall cattail kind of grass, and I'm like, why haven't I ever painted them? I'm like, I don't see them along the North Shore really. But I was like, they're everywhere, and they're just so fun. Then I realized that I was going 45 on 60, and other people were getting mad at me because I was like, oh, look at that one, and so I just made a note in the car, like, paint at least 3 red-winged blackbirds in the same painting. Because when I was slowing down, I saw where one had sat, another one had sat, and then the third one joined him. And I was like, that'd be kind of cool. I've never done a painting with 3 birds. And so I just wrote down real quick, 3 red-winged blackbirds when I stopped at Quick Trip, and So, yeah, and then I'll talk to people and I'll try to learn the word, because I'm not fluent in Ojibwe, but I've never heard the Ojibwe word for red-winged blackbird. And so now I'll go and I'll seek out to learn the language too about that little spirit. But yeah, they're wonderful, little hoppers. Yeah. How about you? Yes, my favorite student.
What's the largest painting you've ever done?
Mural or non-mural?
Doesn't matter.
The largest painting I'm going to do a mural sometime before the end of July that I believe is 20 by 80 feet. It's a whole side of a building, and I'm working with my buddy Adam Swanson, who's an amazing artist from Duluth. The biggest non-mural piece that I've done, probably most recently, is I did a Thunderbird that was 2 feet by 3 feet. And that's big for me. That's not big for most artists. So now this beaver that I'm talking about is 3 feet by 4 feet. Now I want to see, because working big versus working small, like if I'm going to paint in my style with small dots on a mural, I can't do dots this size, or it would take me 200 years to do. So now I have to teach my hands how to paint big again. And so right now that's why I'm doing this beaver piece, so I can learn, I can get my strokes bigger, I can get my muscle memories in my hands stronger. So, good question.
Can you tell us about the pine marten piece over there?
Yes, it's one of my favorites, and maybe we'll finish with that piece.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, tomorrow I'm painting the sister to that painting, or the relative to that painting. So, as a part of my residency up in Tetigooch, is I'm painting the different relatives and beings that I meet while I'm in Tetigooch. And one of the first experiences I had was I was up in Tetigooch and I saw a flash of this brilliant orange. And I did not think it was a marten. I thought it was a squirrel. And then I realized when I saw the white and they're not huge animals, but you don't see them very often, but he was there. And I got so excited that I saw him. But then I realized what he was really coming out is because he saw a squirrel on the adjacent tree. And they are not friends. And so he came out, and I was so just fascinated by it. And Kurt Mead, who is the naturalist in Tetigooch, we had this great conversation about that the pine marten, where they live in terms of the ecosystem and the different relatives, but this pine marten, they're so adorable, but they're so ferocious and so mean. and incredible hunters that I couldn't ignore it, that I had to paint it. So this is the very first piece of the residency. The Great Gray Wolf also is part of the residency. I'm working on the beaver. There's also, my brain just escaped me, another piece that I've finished. I'm working on a crawfish as well. There's a species of crawfish that are in the Baptism River. So this guy was the very first one, and then I had to tell of course I called my dad to talk to him about it, and my dad was like, Martin has to eat too. And I was like, good talk. So the piece that I'm working to complement this is I'm doing a red squirrel. I'll be working on a red squirrel here tomorrow while I'm doing another painting class, because if I'm going to honor this being, then I'm also going to have to honor the squirrel. So, I'm good. Thanks.
Are you conflicted about the squirrel?
I love squirrels. I know.
Those squirrels hate buddies. I don't know.
I mean, you're lucky you're lucky you're not a neighbor of mine. I have a Fond du Lac elder on one side of me, and I have an amazing white couple on the other side, and we have a great relationship, and we just really take care of each other. It's truly a sense of community. But my encouragement of different animals to live in my backyard has become a conversation topic over the fence, because I've encouraged skunks to move into my backyard, named him Roger, feed him. He's inspired paintings. Like right now, like if raccoons have come into the backyard because I feed the fox that comes, and so squirrels have been a topic, and so we kind of had a nice compromise where there's these things that you can buy that have sound to keep the squirrels out of your yard, but they put them in a specific place in their backyard so it doesn't impact my yard. Because when they put them, I was like, oh, that's going to suck when something happens to those machines with my water hose. But yeah, so I encourage every animal to live in my backyard except for the pigeons and the rabbits. And the rabbits and I have an understanding that if they get out of the yard when I go in the backyard, then they get to live another day. They have to show the proper respect.
Seems like encouraging the fox helps with the rabbit.
Oh no, I've encouraged. Let me tell you, I didn't say how I maintain this balance, but there's been times when I've seen a fox go around the front of the house, and I'm like, "Go, we'll go. You can get him, fox!" And the fox chases the rabbit, and there's another fox in the backyard waiting for. And I'm like, "This teamwork." So.
My husband baptized his skunk.
You should. Fun fact about skunks is they used to be a part of the otter family up until recently, and then they got moved into their own class. And I love any type of cat species, and skunk babies are kittens. So yeah.
Has Roger ever sprayed you?
He has not. He knows that when he does the headstand move, he gets a warning, which usually involves me stopping and be like, Roger. And then I back up, and he goes back to eating the celery or whatever I put out for him. And he lives under he loves celery and asparagus.
You hear the crunch?
I sit on the deck and watch him eat.
And you hear...
Yeah, I hear him. Yeah, I love his little waddle. So, and then my neighbor also will let me know when Roger's in the backyard, because we've turned our cameras so we can surveil the whole thing. To the point where, like, when a skunk got hit by a car, and I got the skunk out of the road, and the neighbors were all out there, and then it turned out it wasn't Roger, it was just maybe a relative, because then Roger showed up like 4 months later. Because skunks are similar to whales, they can have distinct markings in their patterns, and you couldn't miss Roger because of his size and because of his tail. And so when I called my parents and said, hey, guess what? Guess who's back? My dad immediately was like, so Roger wasn't in the road. I was like, no, he's back. My dad's like, oh, your neighbors, your poor neighbors. So I did a painting of him. So, very much. Thank you.
Thank you.